Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and we live in a world where everybody is on social media, and as a result, too many of us feel like we're an expert when it comes to social media. Well, today we're going to find out just how powerful social media is and some tips for using it more effectively from a real expert, somebody I really admire, Nils Smith of Dunham & Company in Texas. Now, Nils lives in New York. He travels all over the world, but we captured him just for this podcast to spend a little time with us talking about the power of social media and how it can help you in your career. Nils Smith, I am thrilled that you are on the podcast. I'm a big fan of yours. I've been following you for a long time. We've been friends for a long time and done some interviews together at conferences and other events. And the thing that got me hooked on you early on is the fact that, as you know, there's a lot of social media experts out there. I think everybody with an Instagram account is now a social media expert. But to see someone that really develops strategy, somebody that does research, somebody that's really into spending the time figuring out what's working, what's not, and then how to make that work for certain personalities, certain leaders, certain organizations. That's a really refreshing thing. So I am thrilled that you're on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming.
I appreciate you having me, Phil. It's a huge privilege.
Now, one of the things you do with Dunham & Company is you go out and consult with a lot of different organizations, specifically churches, ministries in particular. Is there a common thing you see out there, a common mistake a lot of churches make when it comes to social media?
You know, I think the biggest mistake is not investing in it and not doing it. And so I think so often what I hear is, let's talk about it a whole lot, but they never get it off the ground. And so even whatever strategy they built yesterday is going to be irrelevant pretty quickly. And often by the time they even launch it, it's irrelevant. And so it's moving too slowly, I think, is the biggest mistake that I see ministries.
That's interesting. Let me ask you a question about churches, for instance, and ministry organizations. I have the feeling that a church social media platform is important, but it's largely a megaphone. You're announcing the Christmas pageant, you're announcing Vacation Bible School, or when the live stream is going to be. It's not really the place where you have conversations so much. Is that where a pastor's platform, a worship leader's platform, a communication director's platform, how does the church platform and then the leaders' platforms, how do they all work together?
I think very carefully. It's not easy, but I think realistically there's different purposes when you think about the different platforms, and people connect to people better than they connect to an organization. And so that's where the pastor's platform can be very important to connect in a personal way. Now that changes often by the size of a church and how engaged it can be, or even their desire to engage socially on social media. But it's difficult because in some ways you need to manage the brand of the church, the brand of the pastor or pastors, and even every individual that's a part of the church is part of that brand. The way that the community around the church, connects to the church itself.
So do you encourage leaders at a church to get, here's the thing, everybody's going to have their own personal social media platforms, but obviously people know they work at this church. And, we've seen in the news recently, some high level church leaders were saying some pretty political things that were really inappropriate coming from a church, and they got a lot of criticism over it. So yes, you have to be sensitive, but do you encourage church leaders generally to be out there talking about their work at the church and the ministry and what they do?
Absolutely. I think it's such an incredible platform that pastors have today, where they don't have to wait till Sunday to talk to their congregation or even to speak to their community. We can go on Facebook Live instantly and engage around something or post something that's important. I think one of the valuable things that we have today, and like him or not, Donald Trump, we get to hear directly from our president on Twitter. And so it's a platform that in the past, presidents or politicians had to go through the media to get a message out, where now it's direct from the source. And with social media, it's the same way for pastors. They now have this platform to communicate directly with their congregation anytime that they want. And it's not just communication, Phil, as you were saying, it's ministry. You don't have to just preach a sermon on Sunday. You could preach a sermon on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, and pastor your congregation throughout the week. And it's a powerful, powerful tool that is so underutilized.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've been telling pastors that once the COVID-19 lockdown happened with churches, for all those months after that, I was saying that, look, your live stream is critical, absolutely important. And I've been teaching a lot on live streaming for churches. However, the live stream is only the beginning. You still need to be communicating with your congregation during the week, whether you do Instagram Live, Facebook Live, whatever you choose, and then just normal posts on Twitter and other places. But that constant communication really matters. And I'm just shocked at the number of people, particularly leaders, that forget that social media is social, and they forget to have an ongoing conversation with people.
Yeah, I mean, it's as if you just walked into a room and say, "Hey, how is everybody doing?" and then walking out of the room. You know, like it's weird. But I think it's because we compare it to other media forms that we've had in the past, and so you in the past would get on radio and it was a one-way form, you know, or you would send a letter and people wouldn't write back to, but email, people started responding to your emails, and you had to respond back when they responded to you. And social media is the same way. When you post something, people comment on it. And oftentimes it, you know, for just having good manners on social media is to respond. When somebody
it's funny. About a year ago, I was talking to a pastor about that very subject. And I said, look, post on here and then go in. And some lady responded to him. And so he went in he'd never done this before. He went in and responded to the lady. And her next post was, oh my gosh, my pastor talks to me on social media. This is the most amazing church I've ever been to. And it went nuts. And I'm thinking, you know, particularly if you're pastoring a relatively large church, and by that, I mean, even more than a few hundred people, people just can't call you up any time of day and say, hey, let's go meet at Starbucks and have coffee. But through social media, you can give people a glimpse of what your life is like as a pastor or a worship leader or communications, whatever it is you do. Social media really gives people a glimpse of what your life is like. And that's incredibly valuable for a leader.
It is. I think people want to, especially in ministry, they want to be connected to that pastor, that person that is spiritually leading them in a personal way. But I think too, if you do a small thing like just get on daily and say happy birthday to everyone whose birthday it is, or just say I'm going to just randomly see who's in my news feed and who God kind of aligns to that, and I'm going to just encourage 3 people every morning on social media. There is so much kind of surprise and delight opportunities that exist on social media that can help you better shepherd your congregation or whatever ministry you might be in. You're able to engage and connect with people that are looking to you as a spiritual source in their life.
I think that's really important. The idea of, as a social media person, you're reaching out and engaging with people preemptively. If you could say, I had a great conversation with Dave Adamson, who does social media. You know, Dave from Andy Stanley's church. And he said he'll look for hashtags out there like moving day or new in town. And he'll find people posting that and reach out to them in the geographical area of where North Point Church is. And he'd start conversations with people like that. So it's not a matter of posting a scripture or posting another clip of what the pastor says. Oh, that's good. But the fact is, social media can be a very intentional tool to reach out to people, not just post some message and, like you say, walk away.
Absolutely. One of the things, a story quickly, Phil, where I used to lead onlinechurch.com, we used to use a similar strategy with Twitter, and Twitter search is a powerful thing. And unfortunately, you can't really do that in Facebook the same way. But we used to search all kinds of things, moving to San Antonio. But one of the things we did is on Sunday mornings, we would search hungover, and we would send them a message. I guess you're not going to church. You might as well join us at Church Online. Or onlinechurch.com, and we put it there, and people, the shock factor people would have, they could not click on it then, because we had reached out to them and made that personal connection. It's, some of these things are not that hard, and so often we said it's so hard to get somebody to come to church. Well, now people are a click away from your church, and you can minister to them before they even walk through your doors.
It's a different world. It's a different world. Dave actually said one time that he saw somebody on social media who had lost his dog. And so he took the North Point platforms and put the word out about this poor guy's dog. He wasn't a church member. He's just somebody in the community. And Andy got upset with him for using the church platforms to help the guy find his dog. But sure enough, a week later, the guy found his dog and said, hey, big shout out to North Point Community Church. They helped me find my dog. And that started a whole number of conversations. So it's just amazing. So let me ask you this. I am a big believer, and tell me if I'm nuts here, but I'm a big believer that pastors need to get up in the pulpit and tell people, look, if you've enjoyed this service, if the church means something to you, if it's ministered to you, get out there and talk about it on social media, talk about it on Facebook. If you have a blog, talk about it, because that could start exponential conversations about the church out there. And I don't understand why pastors don't encourage their people to talk it up.
Well, and I think, Phil, we're dealing with the tension right now that's become very public with Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary.
Oh, yeah, which is great.
And I think we've heard I think early days of social media, this is of the devil. We thought that the internet is of the devil. And I think there is plenty wrong with social media.
Yes.
And so I do think from a pastoral perspective, we should pastor our congregants to have good balance with social media and be cautious and careful, because there are plenty of addictive or negative, behavior that happens and can happen on social media. That said, the average American is spending over an hour a day on social media. And I think people connect to people better than they connect to an organization. And so if North Point Church posts something, people at North Point are probably going to pay attention to that. But if Dave posts something, Dave's neighbors and Dave's friends and Dave's family that don't go to North Point are much more likely to see than the random post from the church. And so I think when you can really encourage and empower your congregation to be basically digital evangelists, it's powerful. And digital evangelism isn't necessarily come join me at church. It's sometimes just putting out a message or sharing your church's post. And I think what happens at church is people need direction. You even think about a worship leader, when a worship leader will say, stand up or sit down, or we don't know what to do unless you tell us what to do. And it's the same thing with social media. People don't know what to do. And if you tell them to share, they're going to share. If you ask them to comment, they're going to comment. And so, but you've got to lead them into what you want them to do on social media.
That's really good. That's really good. And it's interesting that I don't know, that just baffles me. I think the moment, we live in a world where social media, a housewife in Omaha can create such momentum from social media that she can bring down a major corporation. Yep. And when you think about that kind of power, if Christians could just harness that to get the message out there, we're not trying to do damage or trying to do anything wrong. We're just trying to share the message. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg for what's really capable out there, what we're capable of when it comes to social media.
Well, and I think so many churches historically have looked at television and radio and thought, man, that's only for the big churches, and it's not fair because they've got all this resource to put out, and of course they're exploding. Where the reality is every church, if you have a smartphone, you can basically be a video church.
That's right.
You can do social media. You don't need fancy tools. You don't even need high-speed internet. You can use the data on your phone to do everything you need to do to have a significant impact. One of the churches, Phil, that I've had the privilege to work with a lot over the last year is Transformation Church in Tulsa. And Mike Todd is one of my favorite people. And he, they're a 5-year-old church. They're reaching over 1 million people a week on their YouTube channel and through their podcast. And they were a church plant 5 years ago. And up until about a year ago, Mike was editing all of their videos on iMovie on his computer. And so this is, and now they literally bought a 4,000 seat arena cash, they're just what God's doing out of that congregation. But it was that intentionality that Mike had as a pastor. And honestly, he guided, he encouraged, he led his congregation online and into that sharing behavior. And so it's a great model of, you don't have to have all the resources. You can literally use the computer in your pocket and to do some powerful things. That
is so true. I mean, I've heard there's at least a couple film festivals now for movies just shot on iPhones. Wow. So I tell media guys, don't tell me you don't have the budget or have the equipment to go out and do something. You've got it in your pocket. Yes. I think that's so important. And we just need to realize the power that we have. So let me ask you, let's shift just a little bit and away from the church to more like professional people, maybe an executive, maybe a freelance writer or a producer or any number of people. How can you use social media more effectively? Give me a few tips about using social media to really launch your expertise, to change your perception out there, to really establish you out there. It's not about talking about yourself all the time, but there are some good techniques for how to establish yourself as a writer, real estate person, producer, whatever you are. How do you use social media effectively to do something like that?
Yeah, Phil, it reminds me of 10 years ago reading Michael Hyatt's book, Platform. And I don't know if you read that, but I remember I was a youth pastor at the time, and I was fascinated by this internet thing. And I was like, man, I think this is going to catch on in the church. But nobody was going to hire an internet pastor. I actually was hired shortly after that as a social media pastor. But here's what happened, Phil, is I literally just started blogging. Every day I would write something about social media in relationship to ministry. And I averaged about 3 to 5 views a day on my blog. Now, luckily, Robert Emmett at Community Bible Church read my blog one day and said, this sounds interesting. Gives me a call, says, hey, can we go to lunch? And at lunch is like, hey, there's this internet thing, and we've built like 10 campuses, and you seem to know this internet a lot. Would you want to come build a church on the internet with us? And he's like, because he read my blog. And at the end of the day, I didn't talk about myself. I talked about what I was passionate about and what I was learning and what I wanted to do. And I think today, blogging is still a thing. I think there's still a ton of value in the written word. But I think now podcasting is a massive movement. I think you see vlogging is a massive movement. You see all kinds of mediums to just start talking about the things that you're passionate about and where you want to go. And so I think everybody has an opportunity to really build a platform. And it doesn't mean you're making it all about yourself. But I think in some ways, even you don't know where that's going to lead, but start talking about the things you're passionate about, and honestly start talking about the things that you want to be doing, because that's going to much better prepare you for what's ahead.
And I have to say, I've seen people out there that are, they don't have the credentials. They're not a expert at anything, but they have a passion about a certain subject, and they've created a huge following just because you're right. That's what they do. They just write about that, and they talk about that all the time. And so I think, using social media for your friends, your family, that's great. But I also think there's a really powerful purpose in social media and developing your expertise, getting known, getting on the radar. As we've talked before, I met a guy who wanted to be a social media expert, but his profile picture was of a kitten. I said, well, what does that do to express who you are and what your expertise is? And so you have to think about your bio that you put up there, your picture, things like that. You want to create an atmosphere that when people see your Twitter feed or your Instagram feed or whatever, it really enforces who you want to be perceived at. So I just think it is a very powerful tool, and I wish more leaders could understand that.
Yeah, I think it's two ways. I think one is you need to talk about what you're doing professionally and what you want to be doing professionally, and the other is you've got to be thoughtful about what you're posting, because how many people, even in ministry, have things they posted 2-3 years ago that they regret, or that follow them. And so I think we've got to be really thoughtful about our platform, even if we think that just what we're posting is just for our friends and family. It's, as you represent a church, as you represent a ministry or an organization, or even an organization that you want to represent, if they see what you're posting, is that you've got to think about these long-term effects of social media. And often they're good long-term effects. When you write a blog, I've got blog posts from 3-4 years ago that continue to drive traffic to my website and continue to generate leads and course sales and things like that. That you never know what's going to happen with that investment that you make 2 years ago, or even today. It's, doing a podcast. You don't know who's going to listen to this conversation right now.
That's true.
And so I think in some ways we want to just help people. And then in that process, you end up, that you never know where it's going to lead. And I think you've got to be thoughtful about the mistakes you could potentially make and what that long-term effect could be, and be thoughtful to create good content that people are going to read or watch or listen to years from now.
It's interesting you say that about being thoughtful. I had just a situation a couple of weeks ago where I had a girl in line who was going to be interviewed by a big church to be their communication director. And I'd known her for years. I'd worked with her with a couple other projects, and she was very gifted, very talented, extremely good. So I submitted her name, suggested they set up an interview. And the first thing the pastor did was go check out her social media. And he discovered that she was really, really political in her social media posts. And because it was a diverse church and there was a wide range of thinking in the church and perspectives and backgrounds in that church, he just didn't feel comfortable hiring a communications director that would be so out front about her political beliefs about what she was doing. So just being thoughtful, because I tell young people, you go in for a job interview, trust me, the first thing they're going to do when you walk out the door is Google your name, look at your social media, check out stuff you've been posting. And, those cute shots of you throwing up after getting drunk at spring break that you thought were so funny last year, they're not going to look so great to a job, to a potential employer. So you got to really think about what you're posting and take that seriously.
Well, and I think even the detail of what does your profile image look like? As people, it's your first impression to people today.
True.
Before you go to a restaurant, you look at their website. Before you have a phone, before I do it, and I have new phone Zoom calls with people, I go and look them up online, and I check them out on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And I think, one of the platforms that's becoming more and more significant is LinkedIn. And I think having your LinkedIn doesn't mean you're looking for a job. I think, but having your LinkedIn set up and posting content, and but be thoughtful and don't post, your old picture and some goofy face or or cat in your profile image. Post a headshot of yourself and represent yourself professionally, and honestly represent yourself professionally everywhere. Obviously, some platforms like Facebook or Instagram, you might be more personal, but I think I think you've got to think about your public persona long term.
Now, it's easy to use an app like Hootsuite and just post one thing across all your platforms.
Yep.
Is that smart? Or do we have different audiences on different platforms that we should customize our messaging for?
And that's a complicated question. I think what's happening more and more, Phil, is that social media is differentiating itself. Social media platforms are differentiating themselves, where Instagram is often more personal. LinkedIn is professional. Pinterest is kind of arts and crafts. YouTube is all video. Twitter is news. And so where it used to be kind of, they were all social media and you just chose which platform you wanted to be on. Now, like if you're looking for news, you go to Twitter. And so but each of these platforms kind of has their own niche. And so I do think that it requires unique attention to each of the platforms specifically. So using Hootsuite or those other platforms to post everywhere is typically not a good idea. Now, I do think there's times where you create good content that is relevant for everywhere. And it's efficient to schedule your content and to distribute it, in a wide manner. But just getting on there and blasting it everywhere is becoming less and less a best practice. And I think the challenge is you're never going to have enough time to do everything you want to do on social media. Even if you didn't sleep and you had 24 hours a day, you couldn't do everything that you might want to do on social media from a content development distribution standpoint. So you got to pick and choose. Like here's where I'm going to primarily be involved. Here's where I'm going to secondarily, and here's where I'm going to repurpose content. Here's where I'm going to just not be, because it's not worth it for me.
Well, when I teach social media, I tell people, look, whatever I say about social media, completely disregard when it comes to my Instagram page, because I just have fun. That's my outlet. That's my therapy. And so I don't go by any rules when it comes to that. But Twitter, Facebook, other things, I'm much more strategic about what I post there. Well, let me ask you a question. Recently, you posted a really interesting statement that you believe the future of social media is video. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking.
Well, and I think it's really the present of social media is video. You look at Facebook, and more than 70% of what's consumed on Facebook alone is now video. Wow. And you look at Instagram, and they just integrated Reels and Instagram stories and even Instagram posts, or so much of that is now video. It was just a photo app a few years ago. And now it's primarily video, and YouTube is all video. And so when you look at the progression of social media, even if you look at Twitter, you see so many videos now in your feed. And so video is naturally such a great medium to, capture your attention, to tell a story, to communicate that's challenging in words, or less efficient in written words. And so while I think there's still a place for all kinds of different content, where you've seen a huge shift is away from graphic memes to video content. And that's where video is very different on different platforms, where the average video view on Facebook is less than 30 seconds. The average video view on YouTube is over 10 minutes now. And so these platforms are different. And then Instagram stories is totally different than even Instagram post. And so you've got different kinds of video. But I think at the end of the day, if you've got a message to communicate today, you have to learn how to communicate via video. And if you have a message you want to communicate or prepare a platform for tomorrow, where I started 10 years ago blogging, it was hard to get a camera. I had just gotten my first iPhone, and just even it was a 4 gig iPhone, like I recorded one video and it was full. And so now we all have to figure out how we get used to communicating on video if we're going to get a message out.
Well, it's funny. Phones are 5G now. However, I'm going to get a new phone simply because of the camera. I want that great, the new cameras are amazing when it comes to phones. And it's either that or get some kind of a compact, bigger camera to lug around everywhere I go. But the cameras today are so amazing. But you're exactly right. And also I've seen so many people do some innovative stuff on video with a phone, and it's just being real. You don't have to be polished. You don't have to be a professional. Just be honest and be you. And it's amazing the response that you can get to video posts. I'm just shocked by it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's actually fascinating right now that Facebook specifically recommends in their post is vertical video. So you see vertical video in stories, but because most people are scrolling their feed on their phone, vertical video catches people's attention in regular posts as well. And so one of the things I found is one of my clients, Nick Vujicic, is he's great on video, but we'll put so much time and energy into a highly produced video, and then somebody will just get an iPhone out and shoot a video of Nick that's personal and kind of behind the scenes, and that gets twice as many views as the highly produced one. Now, I think it's a both and. I think you need to have really thoughtful, high quality video content, but I think you can also quickly capture something and put it out there in a personal way. And I think that's the stories functionality in particular on these platforms has created a really natural, I call it micro vlogging, because you've got to learn how to, just like with Twitter, we had to learn how to communicate in 140 characters with stories. We have to learn how to communicate in 15-second sound bites.
And we're also finding that as people get accustomed to watching content on a phone or an iPad, they'll watch longer. I was invited to a digital summit here in Hollywood a couple of years ago, and they said that, from the earliest days of online video, the research indicated that after 2 minutes, 60% of your audience will bail. Well, now they say that's been stretched to 7 minutes. And if you have a great host or it's compelling content, you can go 10, 15 or longer. In fact, Jerry Seinfeld has been doing 1 hour videos, but he's Jerry Seinfeld. But the point is, their point was, as people get used to watching on a phone or an iPad or other device, that you could go longer. And so people are just getting used to seeing it. So I think this is the golden age of online video. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. YouTube, I was looking at some statistics recently, is seeing tremendous growth on television views. So even on TV apps, YouTube is the #3 TV app that most people watch. Netflix and Hulu are 1 and 2, and then YouTube. And so what you're seeing is YouTube is a search engine. It's where you flip the channel on traditional television. With YouTube, you search, and then it's learning you, and it starts feeding you content, and it kind of feeds you in. TikTok just released a TV app, and you can literally, people will just put it on their it's one of the top TV apps right now, where people just click it and they just watch these TikToks, and it just automatically feeds them their TikToks. And so it's fascinating that the behaviors and even the technology devices as to how people are consuming this content. And it's every social network is unique and different in different ways. But I think YouTube fascinates me more than anything. And I think it's 15 years old now as a platform, but I think it's still in its infancy in many ways. And I think it's still a land grab opportunity as there's so much content there. I think there's still so much good content that can be added. And I think it's really a quality standard now instead of just a quantity.
I tell you what kills me about YouTube is you want to do anything. You want to install an air conditioner. You want to paint your house. You want to change your transmission. There's a YouTube video. I just am baffled. And it's just fascinating to me that the people out there that feel compelled to do a video about how to switch out the ice machine in your refrigerator. And, they're just regular guys. And I'm going to show you how to switch out your ice machine. I bought a new barbecue smoker about 6 months ago. Went on the internet. There's hundreds of videos on barbecue smokers. Yep. And so it's just fascinating, the content that's on there. It's really quite amazing.
It's funny too, because you think about even generations where I'm 40 years old. When I need something on the internet, I go to Google and search it. Anybody younger than me typically just go straight to YouTube and they YouTube it, and that's become the same verb as Googling it. But I had a 2005 Mazda 3 a couple of years ago, and I needed to change the headlights. So I searched YouTube of how to change the headlights in a 2005 Mazda 3. And sure enough, this one video had 50,000 views. It was like a 20-minute video where he step-by-step walked me through how to change it. I mean, it's crazy. But it's not like just I don't know how many people need with a 2005 Mazda 3 need their headlight changed. But there really is a video for everything. But I think there's also a search opportunity for just about anything. And anybody searching hope or Jesus or whatever, like your video pull up. And the sooner you get there and the sooner you build an audience there, the more likely you're going to see long-term effects. And those people that got into the internet and started blogging 15 years ago, honestly, Michael Hyatt is seeing the fruits of his efforts from 15 years ago of writing so much content, because Google is now pulling so much of that all the time. It has continued to. And I think those that are getting good video content on YouTube are going to see the fruits years from now, but they're probably those that got on 5 years ago are seeing the fruits today.
That's true. Well, as we kind of land the plane here, one thing I'd love for you to comment on is something we discovered on YouTube is how critically important the descriptions of your video are, the keywords, the descriptions, the title. Tell me a little bit about that. Don't just throw the video up there. Give some thought to what the title is, the keywords, the descriptions, all those kind of things. How important is that?
Oh, it's critically important. And so often people say that once you've finished editing your video, you're only halfway done with distributing your YouTube video. The title is the most important element when it comes to your YouTube video of what search. If your video isn't searchable, it's very unlikely that somebody's going to find your video. And so often you see ministries that say sermon from December 12, 2005 at, and then
nobody's searching for that.
At FUMC, that it's not, they don't use the full name. And so think about what somebody's going to search and put that in the title. The other thing, and this is a little hack here, Phil, is if you can use the exact same phrase in your first 3 lines of the description, it double boosts that phrase. So think through, what are those key words that you want somebody to search and find? Make sure that's in the title, and then make sure you repeat that in the first 3 lines of the description. And it's boosting within YouTube's algorithm. But here's the other trick is the thumbnail might be the most important thing that you invest your creative time into. And that's that image, that still image that when somebody goes to your video, they see before they click on it. And so basically YouTube's algorithm is based on time watched, how many views it has, how many subscribers you have, and then your search terms. And so it kind of builds out their algorithm within the title and description. But if YouTube shows it and recommends it to somebody, they've got to make the decision to click the video. And what causes them to click the video is most often that thumbnail picture. And so you've got to make sure you're putting creative time into a thumbnail that's going to catch people's attention. I've already talked about Mike Todd, but going to Transformation Church and just look at those thumbnails. And because he's all about he uses a lot of the illustrations and visuals. Well, in his thumbnail, almost always you're going to see that big fence, or you're going to see him standing on a chair, and it gives curiosity of what's he doing on the chair? What's happening? You want to create desire to click that play button. And so instead of just picking a still image of the person talking, pick an interesting image that's going to create intrigue for them to click on it. So you've got to be thoughtful about the title that might trigger the search engine, and then the thumbnail that's going to trigger the click. And then at the end of the day, you got to have a great video that people are going to actually want to watch, because if they watch it for a long time, YouTube sees that it's valuable and they're going to show it to even more people, and then you snowball. That's
fantastic. So that blurry still shot of your first few words is not the one to use for your picture. Huh?
And if you let YouTube automatically pick your thumbnail, I can almost guarantee you that your video is not going to get a whole lot of views. That's just laziness. And I think a lot of people do it because we don't have a lot of time. But if you're going to take the time to upload something to YouTube, it's not that much time to really be thoughtful with your title, with your description, and with your thumbnail image.
Well, tell me, how can people find more about you? What's out there? Where do we send people?
Yeah, so nilssmith.com is my website. And then at Nils Smith, NILS on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere on the internet.
Yeah. And now, are you still doing the blog?
I mostly blog. So now I do a weekly video blog. Where, what I say is 10 years ago, I started learning out loud. And so as I was trying different things, I would just write. Basically, my R&D would go, and it would help me process. It was a discipline for myself. And today I'm doing the same thing. I'm testing different software, and I'll give a review on the software, hardware, or, Twitch or, TikTok or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And I create a weekly video and I upload it to YouTube and I put it on my vlogs, or my blog still on my website. And every now and then I write an article, but I'm mostly prioritizing video today.
That's really smart. Really, really good. So neilsmith.com is the kind of the hub of everything you do. And you can find all your tips and ideas and stuff there. I would encourage people to go. Let me tell you, get your social media team plugged into this guy because he knows where it's at, knows what's going on. And just like I said, I saw this video just recently about how video is the future of social media that Nils had posted. It just really fascinated me because I'm totally into video and I want to see how that fits into the scheme of things. And he's always out there on the bleeding edge thinking of what's going to be next. So I encourage you to check him out. Thanks so much for watching. That was a great conversation with Nils. I'm fascinated by him, and whenever we're together at conferences or working on projects together, I love just sitting and talking to him because he's always out there. So I'd encourage you to continue checking out neilsmith.com. He's got some great, great stuff out there. And remember, share this podcast, share this episode with people that could really benefit from how to use social media more effectively, whether it's a church or a nonprofit, or for them personally. Remember, we talked about how to expand your personal profile as a professional using social media. So share this with people and remember to comment on it. That really helps us an enormous amount. And don't forget my new book, Maximize Your Influence: How to Make Digital Media Work for Your Church, Your Ministry, and You. You can go to influencematters.com for a donation to our Influence Lab, which is helping us train professionals all over the world in social media, video, broadcasting. If you make that donation, we'll send you a complimentary copy of my new book and I'll sign it for you. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you being involved in this podcast, listening, watching. Appreciate everything you do and stay tuned for our next episode.